Hey everyone, thanks for checking in with us. This is the Sportscaster and her son. If you are a longtime viewer, you know that Jason and I would always say this is where sports bridges the gap between the generations, right? Well, we've been doing this now for over 4 years, and our generation gap is getting a little smaller, right, Jason? Although I'm getting a little older.
Hey, you're getting older too, so the generation gap actually isn't getting smaller. It's just less apparent.
Darn it. Anyways, I'm a longtime sportscaster in Chicago, 12-time Emmy Award-winning sportscaster, NBC in Chicago, and now I'm ESPN Chicago. So that's why I'm the mom, and Jason is my son, and he is the up-and-coming sportscaster at UT Austin, right, Jace?
Yeah, up and coming, but I'll tell you what, these days it sure feels full-time. I'm so busy. At UT Austin, I'm a senior, got one more year here. I'm the co-sports director of Texas Student Television, having a great time this football season. Football team's ranked number 3rd in the country, so I cannot complain. Heading up to Baylor this weekend to cover the game in Waco, so it's going to be an awesome time. Been super busy, but it's always nice to stop and take a little break out of my schedule to talk sports with you, Mom.
Okay, so you're lucky in Austin because you have Quinn Ewers, who is a Heisman Trophy.
You knew that name? Hell yeah!
He's the quarterback for the Longhorns. Quarterbacking in the NFL, on the other hand, for the Chicago Bears has been a problem. And Justin Fields is still looking to make the progress to earn not only a 5th-year option on his rookie contract with the Bears, but also just to secure his footing as an NFL quarterback. And it has been some rough going here in Chicago, Jason. It is hard. I do the post-game shows on ESPN Radio in Chicago and on the Bears Radio Network. This has been a rough start to the season.
I can't imagine the first 2 games have been much fun to talk about. Yeah, hasn't been much fun for me either watching it from here, especially, when you go from Saturdays down south here, you get to watch one of the best football teams in the land, and then Sunday, I think I'll watch my favorite NFL team, and back-to-back Sundays, they have looked absolutely horrible. Not a whole lot of analysis that really needs to be done here. The mix between the play calling and just the lack of progression from Fields has been awful. No fun for anybody to watch. It's the same stagnant offense as last year. Same lack of execution and just some prettier names, I guess. I mean, Chase Claypool isn't doing a whole lot. DJ Moore's been doing a lot when they give him the ball, but that doesn't happen too often. And the offensive line looks terrible as it did last year. So, yeah, Mom, like I said, not a whole lot of analysis that needs to be done. The Bears look terrible. The quarterback position is just as much of a question mark as it has been, not just for as long as I have been alive, but for as long as you have been alive.
Yes, unfortunately. And hey, folks, you can go to TeePublic and go on our website, thesportscasterandherson.com, and you can order. We have a T-shirt and we have sweatshirts. Here, I'm wearing my sweatshirt. There we go. But we have the quarterback T-shirt that lists all the names of the quarterbacks from when I have covered the team over the last 20 years. And it is frustrating. It is really frustrating. And this is the focus of today's show, is a quarterback in the NFL. It's not Justin Fields, but it's another former Bears quarterback.
You said former as if you're foreshadowing the fact that eventually he'll be a former Bears quarterback.
I know. You know what? I'll tell you why we thought about our guest is because Justin Fields is, 6 sacks in week 2. He gets hit a lot. And a lot of people
2 that he ran right into.
I know. And some of them are his fault, but a lot of people are worried about him. So
yeah, and this will be a big topic of what we're about to talk about, but winning is something that we just want to see more of. With this quarterback that we're about to speak to, it wasn't as much about the personal numbers or the big 70-yard runs, the escapability. It was about the W's in the win column. And just so excited to talk to who is probably the most accomplished Bears quarterback on paper of the team's history, at least in the NFL.
Okay, Jason, let's bring in our guest. He's a 15-year NFL quarterback. Jim McMahon, everyone here in Chicago knows him well. 7 seasons with the Bears before leaving and going to play for a bunch of other teams that we're not even going to mention. Sorry about that, Jim. Jimmy Mack, how are you?
Doing well. Good to be back in Chicago. This is the kind of weather I remember leaving, so still early in September, and we're a little bit chilly right now today, but yesterday was beautiful.
Yeah, it's not exactly golf weather for you, is it?
Well, the golf's been tough lately. Anyway, I've been dealing with a bad foot for 2 years, so it's been hell.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. Hey, I want to ask you first and foremost. You're one of the few quarterbacks here in Chicago that fans actually still admit to liking. If they are reminded of Sid Luckman, everyone rolls their eyes. The more recent guys like Jay Cutler, everyone just kind of goes, I don't know. Why has it been so difficult in Chicago to get another Jimmy Mack?
Well, they got to win. Winning takes care of a lot of things. So they just got to start winning games, and they'll be okay. I don't know. I don't follow the game, Peggy. I don't. I've been out for so long. It's just it's not part of my life anymore. I just kind of check in on guys that I know they're still coaching, friends of mine, teammates. See how they're doing, but other than that, I can't sit and watch a game.
So you said that you're checking in on your friends who are still coaching. Are you by any chance friends with another former BYU quarterback who's coaching, Steve Sarkisian?
No, Steve came out way after I did, so I really don't know Steve. I check in on Andy Reid, who's done pretty damn well for himself. Obviously, Leslie Frazier's still up in Buffalo, I believe, and Ronnie Rivera's in Washington. So, yeah, I just kind of see how those guys are doing.
Well, I got to ask you, since Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs are on the Bears docket this week. I know you don't watch, Jim, and I know you're not keeping up with these guys, but a general quarterback question for you. Right now in Chicago, Justin Fields is going through another coach, another quarterback coach, another offensive coordinator. They're trying to fix him, trying to help him identify defenses, trying to go through his reads. There seems to be so much in his head. And then you look at a kid like Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, who has a very flawless entry into the NFL. What's the biggest issue from you when you went from college to the pros? What is the biggest transition for guys at the quarterback position?
Well, most of the guys coming out when I didn't throw the ball much in college. So that whole concept of being able to, know what the hell's going on the defensive side of the ball is alien to them. I was very lucky. We got to throw the ball a lot in college, so I understood that what the defenses were trying to do, and it's process of elimination. There's only so many things they can do by the way they line up. Originally, they all try to fool you, but there's always keys that give you that should alert you to things that are going on. And I always took my keys from the safeties. That's why they call them safeties. They're supposed to save your ass. And if they're not, in a position to do that, that should be a red flag for you. And you should be able to identify things before you even get the ball. You should know who you're going to be able to throw it to. And if you can, that eliminates all the guesswork. If you've already done your homework and you understand, okay, this is the guy on this play, and then you continue on with that. And then you confirm that on your first step. Once you get the ball, you confirm what you believe. And if you've made that confirmation, the ball should be gone. I just saw a stat. I just happened to be watching the news the other night and saw a stat where they said, I think it was over 3 seconds before he throws the ball.
Yes.
And, 3 seconds is a big time luxury. And I think that 3 seconds is added in all the times he has to run around. And so, he probably holds the ball a lot longer than he should. And that's
Jimmy. And you had the same offensive line. You had the same guys playing on your line forever. And he's got guys that are constantly changing, constantly rotating out. It's not the same.
Well, that's the biggest reason quarterbacks can't be successful. Unless you got 5 guys that you can trust every week up there. You're not, especially if they're putting guys in 1 week and next. That's very tough on the O-line as well. They have to get used to playing with one another. And I was very fortunate in Chicago. I got to play with the same guys the last 5 years I was there. So these guys knew everybody knew what we're going to do, how we're going to run the ball. And it's a credit to those guys that we were able to do that. We led the league in rushing. I think it was 4 straight years, which had never been done before and never been done since. And that's a big time credit to those guys because everybody knew we were going to run it, and we still were able to do that. And why only Jimbo off that offensive line is in the hall, it's a mystery to me.
Jim, you played 15 years in the NFL as a quarterback. We talk so much now about what year does the quarterback figure it out? Like, what year do you kind of get to tell what player you have in your quarterback? And I've always thought it's different for everybody. And so when you play in the league for a decade and a half, like, when would you say you really figured it out and were able to turn into the quarterback that everyone remembers you for being for the majority of your career?
Like I said earlier, I thought I was way ahead when I got here because, I understood defense. And unfortunately, I didn't have to read anything. It was turn around, hand the ball to Walter. So it was very frustrating for me to be in that kind of offense. I talked to Mike a lot about it. Why can't I, at least trust me to throw the ball 6 yards? I said, I can tell when it's going to be a blitz. Why can't I just audible to a halfback option route with Walter one-on-one with the linebacker? There's nobody going to cover him. And he just liked running the damn ball. So, but to me, it wasn't that hard to figure out. I felt very comfortable from day one. I've always had confidence in my ability. And plus I knew, I always knew I figured I knew what the hell I was doing. So I figured I was ready day one. But I think, excuse me, the latter part of 83, I think we won 6 of the last 8 games to go 8-8 that year. We started gelling a little bit offensively and the offensive line. And then 84 really came together. And those guys played good from 84 to 88 when I left. They were as good as anybody. And
so another thing that I'm super curious to talk to you in particular about is, the preparation aspect and sort of like the how much these players seem to care. I think that the effort in week 1 against Green Bay, like you absolutely annihilated in week 1. You would have never been able to tell that it was a rivalry game unless you were able to see the colors of the Packers jerseys. When you were around in the NFL, was there sort of like an extra, like added motivation in those rivalry games? Because it seems a lot more watered down now. What was it like with the week-to-week preparation? It seems like when you were in the NFL decades ago, the players really hated each other on the other teams a lot more than they do now.
Well, the Bear-Packer rivalry was pretty damn bitter the time I was here. Especially when Forrest Gregg was the coach and, of course, Mike. They didn't like each other. So that kind of trickled down to the players. And it was, they weren't really that good, but they played us hard every damn time. In 85, we had to come from behind to beat them, I think 10-9 or something like that, if I can remember right, up in Green Bay. And I don't know why we always struggled against them. And it was because of the rivalry. It was just for some reason, they played their best game against us, and we but I only lost once to them, so I didn't have to, eat a whole lot of crow when I got up there.
Hey, speaking of Green Bay quarterbacks, when Aaron Rodgers last year, before he left Green Bay, he caused quite a stir by admitting to people that he had done ayahuasca during the football season. And it made me think, Jim, did you ever do any illicit, illegal drugs when you were playing?
Well, I don't even know what ayahuasca is, but I did enjoy cannabis while I was playing. I've always enjoyed it. I've been enjoying it since I was 14 years old. I never knew how good it was for me until probably about 10, 12 years ago. I met a doctor named Umadana Balin. She's taught me everything I know about the plant now. I just said, Doc, all I knew was it made me feel good, it made me eat, made me sleep. And she said, that's what it's supposed to do. She goes, the system in our bodies, the endocannabinoid system, everybody has one. We're supposed to be using this plant. And it's the THC stands for the happy cannabinoid is what she explained to me. Because when people are using it, they're pretty happy. And I can attest to that.
So let's talk about your newest endeavor. It's a new marijuana brand by Revenant Holdings. It's called Mac 9. It's available in flower, pre-rolls, vape cartridges. You told us how you started first, smoking weed. Let's talk about, tie it in with your football career. At what point, Jim, did you really need it to get over the pain from all those hits you took in the NFL?
Well, like I said, I've used it pretty much my whole life since I was 14. I never failed a drug test. We got drug tested every July. The guys that actually partook of the cannabis plant, we knew better. We'd stop smoking at start of June to give ourselves 45 days to clean out. And then as soon as everybody took a test, we'd all be out in the cornfield. But because back then, if you were clean your first test, all they could bust you for was steroids. You know, you could literally smoke a joint in front of the guy taking your sample. You know, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do anything about it. And the guys that really had problems were the guys that were getting popped for cocaine. I mean, that's a crazy drug. It's dangerous. I mean, anybody who's doing it now is ridiculous because who knows what's in it. Yeah, those guys really had a problem because if you got busted for that, because that only stayed in your system 2 to 3 days, and if you can't wait that long and you get popped in a training camp thing, you definitely have some problems. But yeah, it definitely helped me get over all my injuries. I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I would have been able to come back from some of the surgeries that I had as quickly as I did without it. It was able to get me through my workouts and all the pain that I was going through. So, yeah, it was a big part of my life. It still is. I had to take some opioids after my last surgery that got infected and my foot blew up. But other than that, I haven't touched one for probably almost 15 years, 14 years, something like that.
So my question would be then, I think that the thing that is really getting in the way of this becoming something that's like a lot more common, you know, with NFL players and especially the quarterback positions, what I want to talk about, because there's a little bit of a stigma still that exists with cannabis and THC. And especially, you know, like you would have fans who are just saying, oh, I don't want my quarterback smoking weed. What do you say to the people like that?
Well, smoke weed and figure out for yourself. I always felt that I focus better. I get a lot more stuff done when I'm, after having a bowl or something in the morning, and I get a lot of things done. It's not like I just sit around and eat chips all day. I don't get the munchies. I'm not a big fat ass. It's just part of my life. And, I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, have a bowl, get my day started.
And so it's very interesting how you said you would get away with it in the NFL. How did you get away with it in college at BYU? I feel like that'd be a little harder.
That was harder to find. That's for damn sure. But the same thing. I mean, it grows everywhere in the world naturally. So, it's if you need it, you can find it. It was just a lot tougher.
Yeah.
You've been very outspoken, Jim, about the NFL still drug testing for weed. Talk about why you think that they should get rid of that as a drug test for NFL players.
Well, they're always telling us that we're responsible for what goes in our own bodies, and they can feed us all the opioids they want, and that's good for us. That's what they tell you. But opioids are they're known to be addictive. They're known to have been killing people. Cannabis does neither one of those. It's not an addictive drug. It's a medicinal herb. It's not a drug. Drugs are only made when man puts his hands on it, starts putting chemicals in it. You'd never have a cocaine addiction if you just ate coca leaves. But it's all the other stuff that they put in that makes you, addicted and it makes you crazy. So I don't even know where I was going with that. But next question.
Not a problem. I wanted to ask you, though, you have recently also said that you have CTE, and we're talking about some of the effects of, this physical, violent game of football. And, Jim, I did the story on former Bear Mike Adamle, who might have been one of the first living patients to be diagnosed with CTE. We see what's happening with Mongo, and it's so heartbreaking. Dave Duerson lost his life, and his brain was then tested after postmortem and showed that he had CTE. What are you going through with the CTE? How is it affecting you?
Well, like I said earlier, I go back to New York about every 4 or 5 months to get an adjustment. It's not a manual thing. It's actually a machine that they put it behind my ear. I hear a click, and that's basically it sends a pulse through my neck to move the bones. My bones get all out of whack. I've got a couple different spots in my neck and my head that the bones sometimes move, and it chokes off the spinal fluid. And that my doctor believes the spinal fluid is what actually causes the CTE, because it's supposed to go in there and flush out all the bad stuff and circulate. And if it's just pooling, sitting there, it's basically eating away. It can eat away bone. It could certainly eat away at the brain. So there's no doubt in my mind I've got some type of impairment. They've done some studies on they put some skull caps on me. They mapped my brain. You're supposed to have certain waves, certain parts of the brain. I actually had a flat line the last time I did this test, or the first time I did the test. And I said, what is that flat line there? And he said, well, that's your short-term memory. He goes, you have a problem with that? I said, yeah, I probably won't remember this test tomorrow. But I was in San Diego for about a month and a half. I was getting 2 treatments a day. My brain was actually responding because that flat line has now got some waves to it, which is, he said, that's a good sign. And so I'm doing everything I can to, just to be normal. When I start having problems, is when I give my doctor in New York a call. I start having headaches. That's the first sign, and then I know just to call them up. But at least I know what's going on with me now. My buddies Dave and Andre Waters, who I played with as well, they didn't understand what was happening. I didn't either. I had the same thoughts they had. I was living in my room weeks at a time in a dark room, just staring at a ceiling fan. Because the only time I felt halfway decent was when I laid down. And the doctor explained to me, because when you're sitting up or standing up, gravity is pushing down just enough on your head to choke off those lines of flow for the spinal fluid. So at least now that I know it, I can deal with it. My only other option would be to put a shunt in. They put a tube from your brain down to your stomach. I don't want to deal with that. So at least I know. And when I start having my symptoms, I go get it taken care of, and I can function fairly normally.
Wow, Jason?
Yeah, the only question that'll really bring to me is, in hindsight, you played 15 years. You played the position that takes the most hits, at the center of all the action. My question for you is, do you think that going through what you're currently going through, and like you mentioned, you have it very much under control, you're able to live a pretty normal life. Do you think that those sort of defects are inevitable from somebody who plays as long as you played? Or do you think that things can be done, especially today, 40 or so years later, to prevent the quarterbacks of today from going through what you're going through?
No, it's not only the QBs. I mean, it's anytime like these big men collide together, their brains are going to hit the side of their skulls. There's no way around that. No matter how good, sorry, my phone's going on. But no matter how good the helmets are, it's not going to stop your brain from slamming into the side of your head. It's just not going to happen. Guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to have to deal with this later in life. And, all we ask of the NFL is just take care of the guys when they have their problems. Not just the guys that because the concussion lawsuit, why it was called that, I don't know, because it had nothing to do with concussions. Because unless you have ALS, dementia, Parkinson's, there's a couple other ones, actual brain diseases, you don't get a dime. And the guys that are offing themselves are the guys that are still having concussion syndrome. The stuff that I'm having with the headaches and the forgetfulness, and it's a very frustrating thing. And these guys are proud. They don't want to ask for help. I had no idea what the hell was going on with me. And when I heard Dave, I was with Dave Duerson probably a couple months before this tragedy happened, and I would have never suspected this. He was a lot quieter than he usually was, but I had no idea he was going through the pain that he was.
Wow, it's really sad to hear. Well, Jim, the options are not a lot for you guys. And even today, it's take opioids, and then you get an opioid addiction. Is it true you were taking 100 Percocet a month at one point? Was that after one of your surgeries?
That was pretty much throughout my whole career. I mean, even after I quit, I think the first 5 years after I quit, I was still eating. And that's when it was 2010 when I moved to Arizona, when I took my last one, other than this past surgery.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I can completely understand why you are getting behind the Mac 9, the new marijuana brand by Revenant Holdings. We appreciate you taking your time. We appreciate your honesty. It's always good to see you. We wish you continued good health.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. It's always great to see Jim McMahon. Thank him very much for joining us. If you want to follow Jim, you can follow him on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. He is at Jimmy McMahon. No, actually on Twitter, he's at Jim McMahon. Jim McMahon. And on Instagram, he's at Jimmy Mac 9XX. All right, Jason, we need some predictions.
All right. Yes, we do need some predictions. Okay, so it's been a pretty bleak past couple of weeks and months in Chicago sports. And so I have 2 Chicago sports predictions and then one, I think actually for the first time ever, a non-sports prediction today. So my first 2 Chicago sports predictions, first off, I'm going to lead off with the Chicago Cubs. Where things stand right now, we have 2 weeks to go in the regular season, and they are a half game up on the last wild card spot. There are 3 wild card spots in each league this year, so it's not a bold prediction to predict whether or not they're going to make the playoffs because they are right on the cusp. I'm going to go with them making the playoffs. Justin Steele got absolutely tagged this weekend for 6 earned runs, but I think that he is one of the best Cubs pitchers in recent memory, putting together their best season statistically by a starting pitcher since Jake Arrieta in 2015. Yeah, quite a deep cut there. So Justin Steele, I think the pitching is good. What I said about the Cubs all throughout this year on this show, predicting that they would not make the playoffs, is because of the pitching. The offense has gone a little stagnant. Now I'm going to say they will make the playoffs because of the pitching. Marcus Stroman coming back at the right time. Justin Steele, as I just mentioned, looking good. Cubs in the playoffs. I just want playoff baseball in Chicago. I don't, we don't discriminate on the show.
And we don't need both Bears fans and Cubs fans to be upset at the same time. So,
yeah.
All right, next prediction, Jason.
Well, you almost took the words right out of my mouth with Bears fans being upset. This one's going to be a little bit more fun, though. Bleak Bears season, to say the least. I think that would actually be a nice way to describe it. 0-2, going nowhere fast. I'm going to say that the next time the Bears win the Super Bowl, in the spirit of today's episode, the next time the Bears win the Super Bowl, I will be married with at least 2 kids. The next time the Bears win the Super Bowl. So I don't know what year that's going to be. I don't know when. I'm single. By the way, I'm single. But it's a little self-plug. Yeah, when the Bears win their next Super Bowl, I'm going to be a dad and I'm going to be a husband and hopefully working in this industry.
God, I hope I'm still around. All right, what's your last prediction, Jason?
I do too, so you can babysit.
Yeah, that's not happening. Get used to that.
Might as well keep the 2 screens set up here because I want to see your reaction to my last prediction.
Right.
It's a non-sports prediction here. In the spirit, again, of today's episode theme, I'm going to predict that in the next 5 years, so by 2028, by the time, Stella's in college and you guys will probably not be living in the home anymore, I'm going to say that marijuana is going to be legal across the United States. It's going to be federally legalized. I think that we have been moving in this direction for a while. It's kind of been going state by state. I just think that eventually the United States is going to realize a lot of what Jim McMahon has been saying, that the good outweighs the bad. There are a lot of medicinal uses for it. And to the industry. I mean, some of the money that these dispensaries are pulling in right now, it is not very regulated of an industry. So it could be such an economic boom for the United States. I think in the next 5 years, and maybe I'm being a little bit on the long side with 5 years. I really think it's going to be more like 3 years. I just think that the economic and the medicinal benefits of it are just going to really overweigh everything. And I honestly think in the next 10 to 15 years, we'll kind of view this a little bit more as sort of like alcohol, where you can, walk around, drink a beer, and, as long as you're not being like blackout drunk in public, you're not doing anything illegal. So just my thoughts on it. As a younger person, as part of this generation, I wanted to see your face because I know that you probably won't agree with it, or at least the reasoning behind it, but just what I think is going to happen.
No, the only thing I was going to say to you is you're not walking down the streets of Chicago, because people walk down the streets of Chicago smoking all the time. So, all right. And you do bring me to my final thoughts, which is actually a bit of a public service announcement, sort of. I just want to remind our viewers and our listeners that in our state of Illinois, you must be 21 years of age to legally use, possess, or buy cannabis. Okay. It is legal in motor vehicles and public spaces. Oh, it is illegal. I'm sorry. That would not have been good. It's illegal. Do not be driving if you're high. You're not supposed to be smoking in public spaces. Although, again, go downtown and you see people doing it all the time. Seriously, folks, no matter how many people do it, only buy them from licensed dispensaries. Okay. It's illegal to travel across state borders with any amount of weed as well. So just be smart. Okay. Our thanks to Jim McMahon. Don't forget, you can follow him on Twitter, X at Jim McMahon, or on Instagram at JimmyMac9XX. The Mac9 brand of cannabis is made and distributed by the Revenant brand, found at local dispensaries. Jason?
Mom, if you really like our podcast, you can check it out anywhere that you get your audio. My go-to for our show is the ESPN 1000 app. YouTube has been popping off lately. Our last show did super well on YouTube after Mr. Yannick Ngakoue pushed it, so we very much appreciate that. But go check it out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you get your audio. You can find us, and check out our Twitter at TSAHSPod, at TSAHS pod. I should have just cut it off after the first time, but I'm going to be posting clips from this episode on the Twitter. Going to be ramping that up a lot more. You can also find clips on my mom's Twitter and my own Twitter, which you can see down there. Mom, you got anything else to add?
Yeah, we want to thank Jake Cantu. He's our producer over at ESPN Chicago, and that's where you can find the audio version of this podcast on the ESPN Chicago app and wherever you get your audio. That'll wrap up this edition of the Sportscaster and Her Son. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jimmy Mack. Thank you, Jason. Have a great week at school.
Thank you.
All right. So long, everyone.
So long.